say your full name and spell your full name for me.
Hi, I'm Carey Peterson with Blendco Systems.
Okay,
That's
now,
Carey, C-A-R-E-Y.
This isn't going to be in the video.
Okay.
I just need you to say your name and then spell your name.
But I always say that. But anyway, I got you. Carey Peterson, C-A-R-E-Y. Peterson, P-E-T-E-R-S-E-N.
Okay, and Carey, just say the name of this video, what we're going to be focusing on.
We're looking today at the equipment, dilution equipment, and how we...
No, this specific video.
Yeah, dilution equipment.
Dilution equipment.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what the whole thing is.
It's
It's a hydrominder, but yeah, okay. We're going to look at the hydrominder today.
That's what I need to know. Okay. So now what I will
You're
do,
just making a mark, right?
just want to know what it's going to be so I can title it. And this way, because again, I need to know as I'm developing these videos what I'm dealing with. Remember, I know nothing.
No, yeah, fair enough.
So this is what we're going to do. Every time we actually start taping, which we're taping now, but when we actually get to the point where you're going to be on camera, I'm going to count you in. 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
You can go along. Now, if you decide, gee, I want to do that over again, don't just start. Let me count you in again.
Okay.
All right. This way, it makes it much easier for me to edit this.
Right.
Again, knowing that I know nothing about what you're doing.
Okay.
All right. When you are done with something, stay focused on the camera. Don't look away. Don't make faces like, oh, I wish I had done that. Don't let me worry about that. You just hold your gaze until I tell you to go. All right? And we'll get along great.
Okay,
right?
sounds good, Jay.
All right. Ray. With an R.
I did it again.
So just see.
That is
see
so
this?
funny.
This is my half. This is my wife's half. All right?
Okay.
All right.
That's awesome.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
All right, and I'm going to count you in. You're looking here at the camera. You're going to smile. And 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. This is Carey Peterson.
No, don't say good afternoon. Because they may be looking at it in the morning.
Yeah.
Looking at it in the evening.
Yeah, okay.
Just say, hi, I'm Carey, and I'm going to, okay? All right, we're going to get a rhythm to this thing.
Yeah, it's all good.
And 3, 2,
Hi, I'm Carey Peterson with Blendco Systems, and we're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about the hydrominder and other dilution devices as well, and that you'll encounter at the tunnel. And kind of the reason that we're doing this is we want you to have a base for every day. So when you come to the wash, you can look through the back room, you can understand how this equipment works, and you can identify issues and problems, and then learn how to correct those issues. So, and that way you get a good mix. Because remember, if you don't have a good mix of chemical with water to go out on the car to do the job that it's intended to do, you can't get clean cars, dry cars, shiny cars. You either overuse product or you underuse product, both which are unacceptable. So let's start with the hydrominder. It's a very common dilution device used in a car wash. We have water coming into the back of the unit here. There's a valve here that turns it on and off. So it's just simple city water pressure, no tricks. It comes into this valve, and then there's a weight here on the valve. And as the tank gets used up, the level goes down, turning lowering the float, which turns on the valve, bringing water through the device, and it goes through a eductor. And as it travels through that eductor, there is a restriction, and that allows product to be sucked in through the tube and from the pail. So we have raw product in the tube going up to the hydrominder and being mixed with water. So we're going to talk about the details of that in just a minute. So I'm going to turn this thing on, and you can hear and possibly see this tank being filled up. So you can see that we've got water coming in to the tank. So that will fill up until the valve shuts off and stops the flow of product into here. So we call this the mix tank. And that tank is the product that's ready to go on the car. It's moved out with some type of pump that we'll talk about here in a little bit. So let's continue with the hydrominder and basically go from the bucket all the way through the device and show how the product is picked up. So I'm going to move this out here a little bit. And I'm going to unscrew that cap right there. We call this a pail stinger. And as you see, if you pull it up, it's got all kinds of product on it. And if you go to move it, it's going to drip on the floor. You might get it on your pants or your hands, which is never a good thing. So we have this cap, dual purpose cap. You can hold it right over the tube, pull the pail stinger straight up, and it actually wipes the pail stinger clean. So now when you take it out, you're not going to drip all over yourself, your clothes, or the floor, more importantly. So you can put it back in. Oh, at the bottom here, there's a foot valve. And this foot valve pushes the tube all the way to the bottom so that we pick product up off of the bottom of the pail. So that's really important. Otherwise, you've just got a hose in there that doesn't necessarily suck from the bottom, so you can't get an empty pail. So this is kind of a unique thing for blendco, but that's something that you want to look at every day. Is that check valve clean and clear so that product can travel through it? So we put it back in, all the way in, and then you can screw the cap on. Make sure that the foot valve's all the way at the bottom of the pail. The other thing that this cap does, it's real important. Not only is it a wiper for the pail stinger, but it also keeps water, dirt, dust, and bugs, crickets, whatever, from getting in there, contaminating the product, possibly clogging the foot valve, and giving you problems somewhere else down through the wash. We also have a device there to keep this from kinking, because if you, over time, that hose will kink, and then you don't get the flow rate that you should out of the hose. So that you can see it'll kink without it. But with that anti-kink device, we keep the hose nice and clean for being picked up. So this is all raw product in this tube right out of the pail, and it comes up to the hydrominder here where it's introduced into the eductor. In this fitting right here is a tip, and I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to put gloves on so that I don't get product on my skin. So we always want to be safe at the car wash. And you don't necessarily know the strength or what you're dealing with in this pail or what it's made of. So you always want to wear gloves, safety glasses of some sort, and all the protective PPE that are required for that job. So I'm going to pull this. I just put my thumb on the eductor and I pull the tube straight off with my hand. So that's just raw product in it. Right here is the different tips, and each tip will give you a different dilution rate of product to water. So the bigger the hole in that tip, the more product it will pull from the pail, which makes the solution stronger that's going onto the car. So stronger product also equals more cost. So it's very important that we have the correct the correct orifice size to get the correct dilution for that particular product, for that particular function. So if you want to change those, we do that by pulling the tip out and putting in a different size tip. Each tip is colored so that we know that a pink gives you X, and a yellow gives you Y, and an orange gives you A, whatever. So I'm going to go through those a little more detail later on so you can see close-ups of those, but this is where those tips are put in. And that's how you change the dilution of the product. Now you'll notice that there's two eductors here. The reason there are two eductors is we're bringing two different raw materials together to make a usable solution to put out on the car. We talked about this one coming out of the pail, or as we call it, the surfactant side. Okay, the other tube is coming over here and out of this tank. And we're going to go into detail about that tank and kind of the ins and outs of that, and we'll go through it later. But I wanted you to see that that tube does come from that tank. So there are two things that make up this particular product. One side coming from the tank, which is our strength. That's our punch. It's the alkalinity. So this is going to be like a pre-soak or a tire cleaner, something like that, maybe a bug cleaner, something that has an alkalinity to it. And we can vary that alkalinity in this mix container based on the size tip that we put in this alkaline side. So if we want high alkaline, we put a bigger tip in. If we want a lower alkaline, we put a smaller tip in. That gives us the strengths that we want. We have infinite ability to adjust the alkalinity side of this equation. The other side of the equation is the surfactant, and we talked a little bit already about that. If you want more bubbles, more show, more fragrance, more dye, more color on the foam, that kind of thing, you'd use more of the surfactant side. So you'd put a bigger tip in for that side. So you've got the way I like to illustrate it is, this side of the equation is how strong it is. So we can adjust high strength, low strength, or intermediate strength. The other side is the surfactant, which is the show, the bubbles, the fragrance, the dye load that's in the surfactant. So if we want high show, we turn that one up. If we want low show, we turn it down. Intermediate's in the middle. So we have infinite adjustability with these two sides of the equation. So we can get strong products, strong show, we can get medium and medium, or we can get low strength and low show, low strength, high show. You can see the possibilities are endless of what we can get. So what we do usually is we target what we're looking for, and then we shoot for that target by putting in the correct size tips. So that's basically how that works. There's a tube that comes off the bottom of the eductor of this hydrominder, and that goes from the eductor down into the mix pail. There is a small orifice in here that's a restrictor, and we can look in more detail at that later, but it basically restricts flow, which gives just a little bit of back pressure into this that allows that tip to do a more efficient job of sucking the product up out of the pail. But it is important that that's there. So if you ever have to replace this hose, it's important to get something that has that orifice in it. And you can get those, of course, from Blendco. So also, it shouldn't go with that to the bottom. That restrictor should be up towards the hydrominder. So that just slips back on, and there's a tube for each side.
Cut. And 3, 2, 1.
So,
Okay, so you want to say hydrominder pickup.
Hydrominder pickup.
Thank you.
Water comes in the hydrominder, and this is just city water pressure. So coming into the valve, there's a valve right here. When opened, allows water to pass through it and into the actual hydrominder itself. There is a magnet and a valve in here on a float, and as the fluid in the tank goes down, the float lowers, opening the valve. You can probably hear it, which allows water to flow through the valve and down through these eductors. The eductor itself is this blue part, and it can be blue, it can be black, or it can be brown. And basically the different colors give you different flow rate through them, which changes our dilution. So it's important to note that. So what happens in this eductor is the water is squeezed through a smaller part here, which is called a venturi. As it's squeezed through, it speeds up, creating a low pressure, which allows the product to come from the tank or the pail and into the hydrominder. So we're using the venturi effect to pull our product in and get a good mix with the water as it goes by and down into the tank. So each side of this has a different tip color in it, and that tip color gives us the different dilution rates that we're looking for. Those are all documented on a tag that's at somewhere near the dilution device or the tank that it's feeding. And basically, it tells us what function this is. So here it's tire and wheel. It tells us what raw product we're using, which is tire cleaner. It's relay number 5 in the panel, so you can turn it on or turn it off when you need to. The tip for the chemical is a brown, and the tip for the alkaline is a beige. And then these are not applicable to this particular function. But at a glance, you can look at this, you can see what color tips are supposed to be there. You can go to the dilution device and you can see that that is a beige, and a beige is what it's supposed to be. This one is supposed to be brown, and that is actually a medium brown, so we'd have to change that back to a brown. So it's important that we use these tags whenever possible, because it gives you information at a glance without having to wonder if your dilution is correct or if the tips are correct. So they're really beneficial to you to use those tips or those cards.
And out.
Right.
Just tell me what this video is.
This is the flow jet or air pump section.
Okay, flow jet or air pump video. And I don't have you on camera right
That's
now
fine.
at all, so you can just, I'm going to count you and you can just start.
Okay.
Ready? And 3, 2, 1.
So this device is an air pump. This particular one is made by FlowJet. There are several manufacturers of air pumps, but we're going to specifically talk about the FlowJet pump today. They all work basically the same, so all of this information crosses to those other ones. Basically, this pump moves product from our mix tank that's already been diluted to the proper dilution and moves it out to the tunnel or to the bay, then puts it onto the vehicle. So they're very important because they determine how much of our mixed solution goes out onto the vehicle. So if this is running too fast, we're going to use too much product. If it's not moving enough product, then we don't get enough mix on the car and we sputter foam, or we just don't get the coverage that we need. So there's always an air regulator that operates this pump. It's not an electric pump, it's an air-driven pump, which means air pressure coming into the pump moves some diaphragms in there with some valves and makes the pump product. So it's very simple. The more air you turn onto it, the more it moves. So it's important to listen to those during working hours so that you understand how fast that's moving. So that's set at just under 40 pounds. If I was to turn it up to, or down, let's say, to 20 pounds, that slows this pump down. So we're now moving basically half the amount of product from our mix tank out to the car. So you can see that this is very important. If you, let's say that you replace this pump because it seizes up or it's running erratically or it's leaking, something like that, it's very important to document on your dilution card what the pressure of this is, so that when you replace the new pump, you can set it back at the same pressure so that you get the same coverage on the car, because you want to maintain a consistent flow with this pump. So replacing this pump is fairly easy. You basically, there's a little slide under here, and you just pop that slide, and the fitting comes right out of it. Okay, and then the same with these back here. There's a slide that you push back, which releases this fitting, and you can pull it out of the way. The same happens with this one. You just slide it out of the way. Now you have the pump isolated. You can undo the screws, take the pump off. You can replace it with a new pump, screw it into place, and then push these fittings back up in, making sure you get them all the way up, and then you bring that slide back forward, which locks that fitting into place. Then the same with the pickup tube. Goes into this side, which is the inlet, all the way up, and slide it forward. And then the tube that comes from your air regulator, which is what runs the pump, that goes in that small section right there, all the way up, and locks in like that. So now we have good usage. We can turn the pump back on and it will work.
So Carrie, tell us what this video is.
This video is the blue-white pump section.
Okay, and smiling, and 3, 2.
So basically now we've talked about delivery equipment and some dilution equipment. We're going to talk about another dilution device that you see really quite commonly in all kinds of car washes, and that is the blue-white pump. So that's what's hanging here on the wall. This is a dual-headed blue-white pump. Some are just single-headed and some are dual-headed. Every one of these pumps has a sticker on the side. It's on the back side of this one, but it is that tells you the capacity of the pump in output. So in other words, it'll say it's a 3.2 gallons an hour or ounces per hour, and sometimes it's even gallons per day. But it will tell you how much this pump can move in a particular time frame. This doesn't actually dilute product. You know, the hydrominder dilutes product. This just moves product, raw product, from the pail and out to the car wash. Okay? So what we've done here, we need to dilute our product. So the product basically goes in the bottom of the pump, okay? Goes in the bottom and comes out the top. So you can see we've got these two coming together right here, mixing at this T and then going out. Out in the tunnel or in the bay, there's a fitting, and it's actually injected into a water line at that point. So the main dilution happens out there at that injection point. So we're basically picking up raw product, moving it at a specific rate, whatever rate we want, and then it's diluted with water out in the bay. So that dilution can be changed by adjusting this knob on the top. There's a lock screw here. You should never try to turn this without loosening this lock screw. Turn it clockwise, loosens it, then you can adjust the knob on the top. Now it's important to remember that a blue-white pump should never be adjusted unless it's operating, unless it's running. There's some plastic cams in there that are operating that setting. So if you do it without it running, you run the risk of damaging the internal workings of this pump. So, and then when you're finished making your adjustment, it's important to lock this down again. If you don't lock this set screw down, this knob is going to float. So guess which way it naturally wants to float? Yeah, it floats up. So you're constantly, over a period of time, getting stronger in the bay, using more chemistry than you should, which obviously makes your cost goes up. You may not be rinsing cars. So there's several things that can happen as a result of not getting that set screw tightened. And it's usually bad. Okay, so make sure you lock that down when you're done. There's a check valve in this fitting on the outlet of the pump, and there's a check valve on the inlet side of the pump. And that allows product to move through that pump without backflowing into the pail. This is an electric pump, so it plugs in to a switched outlet. So anytime that function is energized, it puts power to that box, which fires this pump. The pump runs for the specific amount of time. Power is cut to that automatically, which shuts this pump off. So it's very simple. Now, what we've done here, and again, we talked about these a minute ago, but I'm going to reiterate, you have your card here that tells us what the function is, what product we're using, what relay it is so you can manually turn it on or turn it off, and then what tips are there. And on this one, I would also write what this dial is set at. So if it's at you know, the full on or number 10, or if it's set at 5. So the way that knob works, if this pump is a 3.2 ounce per minute pump, that means at the full setting, it's going to pump 3.2 ounces per minute. So if you want, you know, 1.5 or so ounces, you're going to put that on 5, because that's half of what it's capable of doing per minute. So you can use that as a gauge, but that's how that works. So right here next to this pump, we have a device that we call the dual manifold. or the dual injection rig, whichever you prefer. But it's actually an injection rig. So you have, again, we're mixing alkaline. This is pre-soak. So we're mixing alkaline from the tank up through this check valve into this block. And this side comes from the pail, which is our surfactant. And we have a tip in that. You can tip either side of this with whatever you want. The surfactant, you can see, has a yellow tip in it, which corresponds to the card that says tip for chemical should be yellow. Okay, so that's actually bringing these two things together in this mixing block, and then they go out to the inlet of the pump. So we actually have a little bit of mixture here, alkaline and surfactant, and then we come up out of the pump. So we call that the injection rig. It's important to always plumb the alkaline source below the surfactant source. And that's if there's ever a problem with the check valve, this alkaline does not come back into this line and ruin your pail, because it can crystallize this whole line up. Okay, so it's important that it's mounted in that position. Alkaline in the bottom, surfactant in the top, and then out to your pump.
Carrie, what's this video?
This will be the Supersat alkaline tank section.
Okay, and you're smiling, and 3, 2, 1.
So now we're going to talk about, if you remember when we talked about the hydrominders and the pumps, we were talking about an alkaline source. So where are we getting that alkaline, which is the punch side of our equation, if you remember. So that's what the Supersat tank is. And basically it's a patented way of bringing powdered alkaline into a soluble solution that can be mixed with our surfactants and water to be used on the vehicle surface. So this is an important step of those alkaline products. This is the, so any pre-soaks, bug cleaners, tire cleaners, you know, pre-soak in your automatic, your self-serve options that are alkaline functions, this is where we get our alkalinity. So basically there's a hinge here and an opening. And we're going to get inside this tank and look at some stuff in a minute, but this is where the powder is introduced into the tank. Everything's automatic about this except for adding powder. So once you add the powder, there's nothing else you need to do with this tank. So on the top of the lid, there are some components. The mixing motor is here. So this motor comes on and off as it's needed to. So you don't ever have to worry about it. Is it on too long or not on enough? It knows when to come on, and it'll come on and go off at the right time. This box back here is where the brain is. That's where the control circuitry is that turns this pump on and off. Also where the readings come to open and close our water solenoid. So basically we're putting city water to the back of the tank, and that stays on all the time. Should be either good city water or soft water. Should never be hot water. So we're bringing fresh water in. When the level of this tank drops, there's some floats in there that turn this valve on back here. It's just a 1/4 inch solenoid valve, which introduces water into the tank. There's a freshwater well at the back of this tank, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. But this puts water in this tank automatically, so as the car wash uses fluid from this, it turns on, putting more fluid into the tank and keeping this always at a constant. This line here has wires in it that goes down to our LED lance. And that lance has a couple of infrared eyes on it, and it's looking across the solution in this tank. And if it can see across that solution, it knows that, because it's been calibrated with that set of eyes, it knows that it's weak. And so it needs to turn the motor on, which then brings some powder up off the powder bed and into the solution. And now we can see that cloud point. So when you look in this tank, it's not perfectly clear, it's actually cloudy. And we can measure that cloud point or that turbidity and see when we need to turn on and off this motor. So let's say it's raining outside and you walk by this tank and the motor comes on and you think, I can't be using powder right now, what's going on? Well, that's happening because of gravity. Those small particles that are making that cloud point in this solution in this tank are slowly over time falling to the bottom of the tank. So the eyes can see each other in there, and it says, oh, I've got to turn on the motor and bring powder back up. So it's always keeping that super saturated level of concentration in here. So you're not actually using powder, you're just keeping it at the right level as you bring that powder up. So don't let that confuse you, because a lot of times it happens in the morning when you're doing your first walkthrough at the car wash and you hear that pump thing or this motor kick on and you think, well, I shouldn't be using any powder. Why is that happening? There's something wrong. It's not wrong. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which we'll talk a little bit more in a minute. So that's kind of the components on the top of the lid. On the label here of this tank, you'll see a line here that says powder fill line. Do not overfill. So here is as high as you ever want to go in that tank with this powder bed. And then the bottom of the label is where the add powder line is. So at this point we could add 1 box of powder into this tank, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But it's very important that you don't overfill this tank. If you do, that powder can get up in the stirring motor or in the stirring paddle that's at the bottom of this motor. And then you overmix and you have all kinds of problems. So very important never to overfill. You could also put so much powder in that you displace the water that's in there, the fluid, and it ends up dumping out the back of the overflow on the back of the tank, and you'll see it running out onto the floor. So that's a waste. So don't overfill the tank. Very important.
Okay, so now you're going to go to...
We could do 2 things. We could do the interior, and then I can add a box of powder, because I want to show them how to do that. I'm assuming that's what you want me to do.
This is all a part of this tank video.
Yeah, I actually need to talk about these over here.
I'm going to let this run then so I don't lose sight.
You know what I do, Kerry? When I put powder in tanks, I cut this out and I stick it under here, so in case they ever have a problem with a lot number,
Oh, how funny.
you know?
Yeah,
So every time you put it, a new lot, the customer gets a new lot.
but I never have trouble with powder.
I'm saying, the customer.
Never.
I know. Well, that's one for Brian Anderson.
He's an idiot. No, okay. I don't know that I want to put it in here,
Right, I'm saying.
but that's pretty cool.
So if anybody says what
Yeah.
lot number's in there, I know. Right away,
So I can't
I
use.
think you did this for Cheetah Clean. This is our little
Yeah,
add-on.
yeah, no, and I like it.
That's why I had to bring the.
Can you do me a favor?
I don't know.
Can you set that box up here? I can't use my right arm to pick anything up. Yeah, just set it on the edge for me. Thank you. I just can't pick it up. Nah, I got something. Thank you.
So this is just a continuation.
Yeah, it's a
I'm
continuation.
still rolling, so I'll just cut this in.
Okay.
In post. So all right. So this is a continuation of the Supersat video, and you're on. Go.
Okay, so I want to show you how to load powder into this tank. It's nothing fancy, but there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And if you do the wrong way, there's a good chance that you will get powder in the air. And this powder can be very hard on your lungs, okay? So you definitely want to make sure that 1, you're wearing gloves, and 2, eye protection. So I actually have safety glasses on, got gloves on, and I'm just going to cut this box open. And I fold back the carton. The plastic bag is locked in the side here. So I just pull that out the slot, and it's all twisted up. So I untwist it so that the powder can flow out of that bag and into the tank. So I hold it somewhere near the bottom, like that. And then, of course, you've got to lift the lid, which I usually do first. There we go. So I'm going to hold that bag, and I'm just going to tip the box up on its edge, and I'm going to let it fall. And I'm still holding that bag in my hand, and I can tell I'm at the point of liquid. Now I let go of it, and it falls right into the solution. Now I just let the bag almost go all the way in. You just shake the powder from it. So you could see if you were shaking this and that bag wasn't in the fluid, you'd be getting powder up all around you and you'd be breathing it. So that's not good. Then you just grab the bag and you pull up. And I'm still in the solution. And there we go. Close the lid and take that bag and the box to the dumpster and you're fine. So now we have loaded powder into this solution tank. So as we move on, we've got to figure out how does the solution get from this tank to our dilution device. And if you remember when we talked about hydrominders, there was a line that came from the tank. So that's this line right here. This goes to our dilution device. And there are 2, 4, 6 different outlets of this tank. So we can feed 6 different things and even one large with a 1/2-inch hose. So we can feed lots of different things from this tank. So one tank is sufficient for everything in your car wash. So there is a small T right here. I'll pull it out a little so you can see it. But we're pulling from the tank into the T here, and then that's going out to the dilution device. This line that comes in here to the side of the T has a brown hydrominder tip in it. This is fresh water, and I'll show you inside the tank where it pulls this fresh water from. But that's an important step. Don't ever plug that tip, because you want a little bit of fresh water to dilute anything that's coming out of that tank that's not solubilized. In other words, remember we talked about the eyes looking across the solution and how it sees those teeny particles in there. And that's how we know to turn the tank off. Well, those teeny particles could fall out in this line. So we bring just enough fresh water in to dilute those tiny particles. Now we have a completely diluted or solubilized alkaline source going to our pickups.
And now you wanted to, we're going to go to the inside?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to keep letting it run, just so I know it's and then we bring this over there.
I'm actually going to lift this lid up.
See if I can.
Yeah, I'm actually going to lift this thing up and set it like that.
Well, I got a good angle on you right now, so that's
Okay.
good. So that's cool. So, all right. So this is continuation of the video. This is looking inside the tank. This is just going to all be in sequence and order, right?
I think so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're on it.
Okay, so inside of this tank, I told you we were going to talk about what goes on in here. This is where we introduced our powder earlier, and it goes into solution in here. And I'm going to pick this lid up and show you the components on the back side of this lid and kind of explain what they're doing. So I'm going to set it right there. You can see, hopefully at the back of this, there's a pipe that comes down, and that's coming from that freshwater solenoid, which puts water into the tank. It's very important that that fresh water is always put in this freshwater well back here. And that freshwater well not only keeps the tank supplied with fresh water, but it also is where we pick up a little bit of fresh water to dilute into that tea that we talked about a minute ago. So, a maintenance item that you should look at, quarterly maybe, are these check valves. Is there something on the foot valve itself that would keep it from pulling water, and are they down in the solution good, that kind of stuff. So that's how water gets into the tank, is through this tube. Next to that tube is this funky looking thing here. Okay, and this is our float lance. There are 3 floats on this lance, so we have some redundancy. You know, we always believe that we have to make this thing work so that you can wash a car and never have the tank be your problem. So the first set of floats that are used are right here. There's a metal disc at the bottom of this assembly that looks at the water, and it just looks at conductivity across those 2 points. And as soon as the fluid drops away from those contacts, it puts more water in. And the reason that we do it that way is that we want to keep this very consistent. In other words, we don't want this to go from really strong to really weak to really strong to really weak. So we're only putting literally that much water in this tank at a time, because as soon as it falls off those contacts, we're putting fresh water in here. So we minimize the amount of dilution that happens in this tank. If those fail, and they do fail on occasion, but if those fail, we have these 2 backup floats. Now we're using these floats to do the same job. But so the reason we don't use these as our primary floats is because of the throw of this. You know, we'd have to put that much water in every time, which could change the consistency of the tank. So those are backup floats. So they're always there in case these fail. These come into use. So that's our float assembly. This lance here is our LED light lance. This is what looks across the solution in the tank. So I can simulate, you can see that the motor is turning inside there, the paddle, and that's what stirs, and it's got the right pitch on it, so that's what brings powder up off the bottom. So you can see that when I block this beam, that motor will shut off, and but I'll have to redo this little section because I have to disconnect something in the box first, as a side note.
Okay.
So we can,
So,
let's cut right there if we could.
Okay.
And then I kind of said that so that you'll know where this goes.
okay.
So, because the motor's not turning off.
Okay.
And the motor.
This is a pickup where he's talking about the LED light connection, right? And the motor?
Right.
Okay. Go ahead.
So this is our LED light lance. You can see that these are the lights that look across the solution in the tank and tells the motor when to turn off and when to turn on. So here is, you can look inside of there, you can see that the paddle is turning. Those blades are set at the right angle to bring just the right amount of powder up at a time off the bottom of the bed. So if I break the beam on this, simulating that this is cloudy enough, then that motor will stop running, and you can see that it stops. Then as the concentration changes in the tank and the particles drop to the bed of the tank, you can see across it again, which in turn turns the motor back on, brings a little bit up, and that cycle goes on throughout the day. When you put this lid back in its place, oh, one other quick thing, I'm sorry, is this light. It's a simple LED bulb. It doesn't do anything but help throw a shadow on the powder bed down there so you can see if it needs powder or not. Has nothing to do with the dilution or how it operates, other than helps you see that powder bed more easily. So that tube has to go into the freshwater well, and then there are 2 holes, one on each side of the tank, and a screw with a nut on it right there that drops into that hole. One on each side, it's properly placed, and you can close the lid. So that's how the actual lid works. Now over on this side over here are some other components that we need to talk about. So I'm going to lift this lid out of the way, and we can talk about these pickup tubes. Again, very important that you're wearing gloves and eye protection when you're messing in these tanks. So all of our pickup, those 6 different pickups are coming out of this pickup bottle, and it has a screen on the bottom. So when you're doing this maybe on a quarterly basis, or if you're a rain day and you need things to check to keep busy or whatever, this is one of those things that you want to look at. Is there any crud built up on the screen that would block product from flowing up into these tubes? So if there is, you can take this apart very easily just by unscrewing what we call the bottle, and you can take that to a sink and you can clean it out, do whatever you need to. This also allows you to inspect the foot valves that are at the base of these tubes, and you can see the actual ball and the seat on each one of these, and you can look to see if there's anything plugging it or are they crusted up, that type of thing. So it's a very easy check. If you do need to replace one, it's a very simple process. You just pull the tube you're working on out, and then I usually take a pair of pliers or needle nose and I squeeze the side of that tube, which puts just a little bit of air in that line, making the valve come apart a whole lot easier. It's also slippery because of the stuff that's in it. So now I've removed that check valve, and if I wanted to, I could replace it with another or take it to the sink, and you might find that just a simple rinse with water through it will put it back in working order. So you either bring a new one or put the old one back on very simply by pushing that onto the tube. Again, one of the things you never do with these foot valves is hit them on the end, because it'll break this glue point and you'll ruin your foot valve. So then you pull it back so that it's in line with your other foot valves. And now we can put the cover or the bottle back in place. Just re-screw it on there, and then it goes down on the side. This is a weight that helps keep this down in the solution. So it's very simple. Solution comes out and goes to the dilution device. These are the freshwater lines that come out from the freshwater well that tee in to this line right outside the tank here.
And just go ahead and tell us what we're looking
All right,
at.
this is the water-driven pump or dosatron section.
Dosatron section. Okay, and smiling, and 3, 2.
Okay, so we've talked about several different dilution devices. Talked about hydrominers and blue-white pumps and all of these different ways to dilute product. Well, I have another way as well, and it's called the dosatron pump. And Dosatron is the company that makes it. It's a water-driven pump. So the blue-white pump, if you remember, is electric. The air pump is driven by air. This pump is driven by water pressure. So city water pressure is coming into this pump. And as long as the valve that operates this city water pressure line is on, it's forcing water into this pump, which makes it go up and down. There's a series of valves and diaphragms in here, but the water pressure is what drives this pump. As that pump moves up and down inside on that piston, the bottom half of the piston comes down into this section of the pump, which is the injection side of the pump. So your product comes from your pail through the pail stinger up to this device and connects at the bottom here on a barb. When you change this knob right here, you change the dilution rate of this device. So for instance, on this particular one, the higher you go, the stronger the dilution rate becomes. So the more product you're using. Again, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to your card on the dilution device. So this is our total car protection. And then we have molten shine, or molten seal, I'm sorry, that's being introduced here. and it's on relay number 10, so you can turn it off and on. We have a pink tip in here, and the dosatron ratio is 300 to 1. Okay, so that is all set here on this dial right here. So the product is actually mixed in a chamber at the center of this pump. So water pressure runs it, product comes up, gets introduced into the dilution area, and then it goes out as a diluted, ready-to-use product on the vehicle surface. So this line would go out to the bay of the car wash or to the tunnel, whichever. So it's a very simple pump, but it is water-driven. So things to watch on this there's usually a screen on the inlet side of this pump, and that screen can be taken out and cleaned, because city water a lot of times, especially on a new facility, can have gravel or little bits of plastic, things like that the plumbers left in the line when they made it. So specifically on startup projects, it's important to keep that Y strainer clean all the time. And I don't have one plumbed in here to show you, but it's very simple. It's just a Y strainer. You take out the thing, you clean it, and you put the cartridge, and you put it back in. So very simple. So that's how a dosatron water-driven pump works to dilute product at the car wash.
And we're out. All right, you're on.
All right, this section goes with the hydrominder that we just talked about. So earlier we talked about hydrominders and how the eductor works and how we pull product up from the pail and introduced with a water stream that comes through the hydrominder valve. I wanted you to see this different hydrominder because it doesn't have the dual eductors. Remember, we were bringing the alkaline together with a surfactant and mixing them together. This is just a single eductor, and this is used for any product that doesn't use the alkaline tank. So you'll see this with any kind of single foamer that doesn't need to be alkaline. You'll see it a lot of times with protectants and things like that. So, but another thing that I wanted to show you is when you're walking through the car wash first thing in the morning or during the day, whatever, whenever you have time to check on this stuff, and you notice that this fluid is not all the way up to the hydrominder. Okay, that's telling you something. So this is something that we want to address. And most of the time, it's because the foot valve at the bottom of the bucket has failed. So at that point, you want to take the pail stinger out and replace the foot valve that's on the bottom. And we'll do that in another section and show you how to do that. But that's something that you want to watch. And I'm going to turn this valve on, and you'll see how that pulls straight up to the tip. And okay, so it pulled right up there. The problem with that is the time that it took for that raw material to move from here to here, we had just water being introduced, no chemical with it. So technically our mixed bucket dilution rate is incorrect. So you always want to have your product primed all the way to the tip. If not, then there's something you need to check or find out. You might have you might have a cracked fitting here. You may have a loose piece of tubing that's allowing air to come in. Something like that's happening, and so it's real important that you, as you do your walkthrough every day, check these kinds of things that can affect how things are mixed at the car wash. Because as I said before, if you don't get a good mix on the car, you're either not using enough or you're using too much. And neither of those are good situations.
Just go back a few sentences. I just hit the leg of this thing and it
Okay.
jittered. So take it back a little bit and redo a little bit. Not much.
yeah.
A little bit.
So it's real important when you're doing your morning checks as you walk through and during the day as well, that things like this, you're paying attention to that. If the chemical's not all the way up here, you're not going to get a good mix in the mix bucket, which means you're either going to use too little product or it could be too much product. Another thing to look at and to watch is my tubing worn out here from going on and off of this barb? And if it's stretched, you might be pulling a little bit of air in that as well. Or this fitting might get cracked or be cracked. And another another issue is the tip here, and you can see I can grab it with a pair of needle noses and I can pull that tip out of there. And if for some reason over a period of time that tip comes out of that barb and is floating in this tube, it's going to allow extra product to go around this tip, and you're going to be using too much product. So it's important as running your regular checks is to make sure that that tip is all the way in and seated so that it's not floating out in this tube anywhere.
Perfect.
The Hydroflex section.
Okay. And 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so we've talked about several different kinds of dilution devices. I have one more that we want to talk about, and it's very common on any newer installation at a car wash, especially a tunnel car wash. And this is a unit that's built by Hydroflex. You can see that we have our branding on it as well, which is really cool, but it's made by Hydroflex, so it's commonly either called an HFI or Hydroflex. And the way it works is we have and it's not shown here, but over on the wall down there, there's a pump. And that pump is plumbed into this fitting right here, which puts 200 pounds, constant 200 pounds across this manifold. So each one of these valves, okay, is a different product that's used out in the car wash. So then up here we have the control side of it, which is, these valves are all air operated. So when this valve opens, it sends air down here, opening that valve, allowing product to flow through the valve, through the injector, and then out this line, and that goes out to the arch or to the car wash to be put on the car. So our product is actually being diluted here at these injectors. And there are different colored injectors that mean different flow rates. So if you ever remove one of these injectors by pulling up on the quick disconnect, they come apart, and you can actually unscrew this and put a different, I can't unscrew it with my hand, different sized injector on it. On the side of the injector are the numbers that delineate what exactly size injector it is. So this is a 0.083, which equates to a 2 gallon a minute flow rate. So that's really important that let's say you had a 2 gallon a minute on there and you change it and you put a 3 1/4 or bigger on there. Well, that's going to change how your product is diluted out on the car. So it's important that if you take a gray one off, you put a gray one back on and even match the numbers. So when you order it, it'd be either 2 gallon a minute or a 0.083. And that is how that injector works. And it's similar to a hydromider. It uses the Venturi effect to actually pull the product up as well. As its water is forced through there at 200 psi, it goes through an orifice. That orifice, as the water speeds up through that orifice, creates a low pressure and sucks chemical in through this barb right here. And each one of these different tips gives you a different size hole. So the bigger the hole, the more product you're going to suck through. The smaller the hole, the less product you're going to suck through. So each one they're color coded, and we'll show you those packs here in a few minutes so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So you always want to, again, you're going to look at your card that'll be mounted right here that says, for triple foam, I want to use this size injector with this color tip. So that's your daily check is, do I have, has anybody messed with my tips? So those can go right back on into place. So just to illustrate a little bit better, we talked a little bit about our pail stinger, which has the foot valve on the end. That goes down into our raw concentrate in a pail or into a drum, pulling product up through this tube, and it goes all the way to our Hydroflex injector. So that's how chemical is introduced into this water flow coming out into the car wash. So the bigger the tip, the more product you're going to use. So that's one way to do it. Another way that we see and that we use quite often is because you might at your car wash or in your truck or whatever have these push-in tips that we talked about before. So these push-in tips, they don't screw into the injector like these ones do. They actually have to be pushed in because they're push-in tips. So they go into this connector, nice and tight like that. Then that connector is put on a small piece of hose that connects directly to the injector. And now you can put your pail stinger line right over that and up onto that barb. So that's one way to do it. To get that off, you can squeeze the side of it and then pull it off like that. Then you can change the tip. So that's how that works. Now you can see on the end here there's a dual injector. So this would be one that you'd be using for pre-soak, or you'd be using for tire cleaner, or maybe even bug cleaner. But that means, so you use two different ports here. One for the bucket with a pail stinger. So you'd put whatever tip you needed in there, and that would go there. Then the other line that goes on this side would come from your alkaline or from the supersat tank. And if it's a tire cleaner, you might need a fairly large tip in here because you want tire cleaners to be very strong, 40 to 80 drops. And we'll talk about titration and drops in a minute. So, or if it's for something that like pre-soak that you really only need about 8 drops of strength, this might be a fairly small tip, but that's where the alkaline hooks to this one. So we get our 2-part system going. As water comes through the injector, it pulls both of those things in, mixes them, and it goes out to the car wash. So that's how an HFI system works. Fairly simple, very reliable, pretty much set it and forget it. But the things you want to look for is my product charged all the way up to the injector, or do I have a bad foot valve that's allowing the chemistry to run back down? Oh. One other thing that I forgot to mention is on the side of this unit, there are air regulators. So there is an air line that comes out of the bottom of this thing that corresponds with each of these injectors. So this air line right here would go out for this particular injector. So if you wanted to add air to that and make it foam, you would run a line from this port right here out to your foamer in the tunnel. And when the thing comes on, when the injector fires and water goes out, then you can adjust this air pressure just by pulling that out, and you can turn the air up or down, which will make your foam wetter or drier out in the tunnel. So that's, each one of these is down here as it goes across. So you can actually set the air in the back room for your foamers in the tunnel.
And cut.
So keep in mind that this card that's attached to the various dilution devices gives you the information. We've talked about this several times today, but it tells you the function. It tells you what chemical is being used. So if this gets removed and you don't know what goes there, you could always refer back to these tags that are mounted around the car wash. They tell you what tip to be used, all of the settings that are pertinent to that particular function. So let's say you don't have these, but it's really a cool idea, right? So what do? 2 things you can do. One, you can find another way to put a piece of tape right here, write the information on it, or better yet, get with blendco, and we'll make sure that you have these tags at your facility, because it's a great reference point so that you always get the right product with the right dilution device at the right setting so that your cars are coming out the way they should. So this tag is a nice tool to do just that.
We're rolling.
Okay, so we've spent some time talking about dilution devices, and you know, there's a lot of information there and a lot of details that are difficult to show from a distance and that kind of thing. So, but there's a couple of things that we wanted to talk about in greater detail so that you're very clear on what we're talking about. So, in respect to hydrominders, and when we're talking about these eductors, and if you remember, we talked about we have a blue one, we have a brown one, and then there's also a black one. And each one of those has a different sized orifice down inside this eductor, which allows a different flow rate. So the bigger the hole, the more it flows, which means the higher dilutions that we can get with it. That's why we have the blue one. And you probably won't see these blue ones anywhere but with blendco, because it's a proprietary component that Hydro Systems makes for us, and it's delineated by the blue. So it actually has a larger hole than the brown, which allows us to get very high dilutions because our product is so concentrated that we need lots of water to go with it because we're so strong in the pail. So that's why we had this made. So if you're going to change this eductor at your site or at your car wash, it's very important that the same size eductor goes back on, or the same color eductor goes back in the place of the old one. Very important. Otherwise, your flow rates will be wrong, your dilutions will be wrong, and you're not going to do the job on the car that you're intended to do. So that's number one. Number two, there are two different sized tips for hydrominders. There are the large screw-in tips that screw in like this one does into this fitting on that goes right into the side of the eductor. This fitting on any of the eductors, that's the same 1/4 inch size, okay? But the difference is this size eductor takes the large screw-in tips. Okay, so you just screw them in till they seat and put your hose on that goes into the bucket, okay? So many times when we set up a car wash, we will actually take this out and we will put in this size, which has a smaller hose barb on it here, okay? And that allows us to use, let me grab the same red color and put that red one into play right there. So that tip is the same. That red tip is the same hole as in that red tip. As long as it's one of these two packs made by Hydro Systems, that's a constant. So you can take out the big one, put in the small one, and then you can use our pail stinger that comes from the pail and actually goes on to that barb like that, okay? And all of our pail stingers are this smaller tubing size, so that's why we take this one out and we put this one in, okay? So if you don't have these, again, these are available from blendco or from your blendco distributor. And because you know, you may have one that gets cracked, maybe somebody snags a hose on it or something and it breaks, so you might want to have some of these available to you. So those are the different sizes. Each one means a different dilution. So we have all these different colors. Now, how do you know which one does what? You know, do I put in the pink one or do I put in the black one? So, and that's going to take a really tight shot to see the difference in those, and we'll get that maybe in a minute. But there is, inside of the, these tips come in a packet. And with that packet comes a legend for us to use. So each one of these colors is listed from largest hole at the bottom. Whoop. Yeah, this particular one is largest at the top and down to the smallest hole. So the largest color is a gray tip. So the gray tip is the biggest hole, and the pink tip is the smallest hole. So you can see exactly which tip is next. So let's say that you're using a red tip and you want it to be just a little bit weaker. Okay, so maybe this red tip is too strong. So you'd go to the chart and you would look for the next smallest tip, which would be from red. The next one down is a white tip. So I would want to select the white tip. You never put a tip in without looking at a light through it and making sure that it's not clogged. Because I've seen them from the factory, you know, something happens with the way they're made or whatever, but you've got to make sure that that tip is clean. On the other side of that, when you take a tip out, you can grab it with a pair of needle noses, pull it out. You never want to put this tip in with your other tips unless you've cleaned it out, because over time there's a little bit of residual chemical in there if you've taken it out and it's already been in use. So that chemical will dry in there and it will clog the tip. So when I'm working at a car wash, what I usually do if I'm going to be playing with tips is I'll have a little cup of water. When I pull one of these out, I drop it in a cup of water. And when I'm finished, I go to the sink and I run water through them and blow through them like that, and then check them up against a light and look through and make sure you can see light through it. Otherwise, you put it in your box of tips, and the next time you need a tip, you grab one, and if it's one that's plugged, you're not doing yourself any favors. So please always make sure that those tips are clean and ready to use the next time you need them. Okay? Very important. So I have one other little option here when we're talking about hydrominders and different color tips. So let's say there's pink, which is the smallest tip, and then the next color from pink in this particular kit is an aqua. Okay? So now, there's a big difference between a pink and an aqua. In fact, if we look at the chart again, it is, 4/1000ths of difference. But that could be significant. What if you wanted a tip that was right in between those two? Or what if you wanted one smaller than a pink, and pink is the smallest one we have? How can we accomplish using less than that or something in between those two tips? Well, that's where this little device comes in. And this is something that's unique to blendco, and it drives our competitors crazy because they don't understand how this works. But simply, it's a black tip with this hose in it. It would go directly into this barb, like that. Then your pail stinger is fed on here like this, and then it goes right over that onto the barb. So now we have this line inside of a line. So the way it works, think about standing at the edge of a lake and you have a garden hose. Okay, just illustrating how this thing works. And you want to suck water out of the lake. If you have a 50-foot garden hose and you put one end of the lake and you suck on this end of it, you can't pull out of that lake. There's too much length in that hose. Now, if you take that hose and you cut it down to 3 feet, you can suck water out of that lake, right? So that's what we're doing here. The longer the tube is that's inside of this other tube, the less product it pulls. And it's just friction loss. We're taking advantage of friction loss. So if we want to use, before I say that, one of the advantages to doing it this way is, let's say we want to use a pink tip. That's how much product we want to use per car or in our mix bucket. One of the problems with very small holes in tips is they plug very easily. So very little contamination can wreak havoc on your dilution. So that hole is so very small that the hair off of a cricket legs could plug that. So it would take very little. So if you look at the hole that's in this, it's much, much bigger. That doesn't clog as much, but we get the same effect by making it long. So a 4-foot orifice tube, we call these an orifice tube, a 4-foot orifice tube is pretty much equal to a pink tip. Okay, so again, if we wanted to go back to our example, if we wanted to get somewhere between a pink and an aqua, we would take a 4-foot tube, which is equal to the pink, and we'd cut maybe 3 inches off of it. So we just clip it like that. Then just make sure that it's not collapsed on the end, it's nice and round. Then you reinstall that orifice tube, and it's going to pull a little more than it did before. If it's still not enough, you clip off a couple more inches. And you keep doing that until you get exactly what you want. Keep in mind that it's difficult to add those together. So if you go too far, you've gone too far. It's better to do it several times, make several small cuts rather than making one big cut and overshooting it, because then you're using too much. So an orifice tube is kind of cool. It drives our competitors nuts because they don't understand how it works. So we use a lot of them, not only for the confusion factor to our competitors, but we can actually feather between tips and get exactly what we want. And it doesn't clog as easy. So we were talking about the pail stinger hooking up to all these hydrominder parts. I think we're about done with hydrominder stuff. We've kind of beat that into the ground, and I think you understand how they work. And if you have questions, feel free anytime. Always call Blendco or your Blendco distributor, and he'll work through any details that you need to talk about hydrominders. So we're going to break down this pail stinger into pieces and see exactly what makes it tick. We've talked about this end of it, the free end that goes to the dilution device that you would hook up to bring raw product up to your dilution device. And this end we talked just briefly about. We have this anti-kink section, and it's actually cut so you can actually take it off. Let's say that we want to replace this foot valve. So this foot valve is at the end of the pail stinger. We've removed this anti-kink device here, and now this tube just goes basically through here and to our foot valve. So we just get a hold of this. You never want to grab the very end of this, because it's a glue, there's a glue part right, or a glue line right here, and if you grab the wrong place on that, you're going to break the end of this right off. So you want to kind of grab it back here near the plastic tube. I don't know if these will do it or not, but we're going to try. And just a twist and pull, and that will come right out of there. You can feed the hose through as you pull, and now you can work on this foot valve. Let's say that it, is failing and you need to replace it. So, this may have been on there for a long time. Sometimes they just don't pop right off. I take a pair of needle noses or pliers, and I just grab the edge of that tube, and I squeeze and stretch it. That loosens that barb up inside the hose, and then you can pull it off of there. So now I've removed that old foot valve. So you can toss that in the trash and get a new one. One other thing I do want to mention here, if you're doing this in the back room of the car wash, you're going to want to have safety equipment on, because now you're touching raw chemical. So you do want to wear gloves if you're doing this, because you really don't need this stuff all over your hands and fingers for 2 reasons. One, you can actually take the oils and fats, it'll defat your hands and they crack and they peel. The other thing is, it looks like you've been playing with Mama Smurf, so you really don't want that. You go home and you're looking like Walt Disney threw up on your hands. So wear gloves, be smart, replace the foot valve simply by verifying that there's nothing stuck in this one, and it just pushes right on the hose. While we have it apart, you can also just completely replace the entire hose. Remember that vinyl hose like this has oils in it, and those oils are what keeps it flexible. Well, some of the products that we use at a car wash take oil and they solvent it, or they actually draw it out of the hose, and then the hose over time gets stiff, so it becomes difficult to work with. So you may need to replace the entire hose. So you just measure that out, cut it off a brand new roll of tubing, which you can obviously get from Blendco. It's important that the length that you are replacing is the same, because just like with the orifice tube, the longer the hose is, the harder it is to pull. So if you double the length of the hose that you're replacing, you've just changed the dilution of your product going to the mix tank because it doesn't flow as easily through that longer line. Okay, so that's really important that you always use the same size, same length of hose. So the new hose just gets fed through this pail stinger pipe, and a new foot valve goes on all the way till it seats up there nicely, and then you gently pull it back. And then this just needs to be pushed in to the end of this. This pipe is drilled out to a specific size that accepts that check valve, or foot valve rather. And you don't want to hit it on a wall or a table or anything like that. I just use my hand because, again, you don't want to break that plastic glue point at the end of this valve. So I just gently push it in. Oh, like that. And now we have a good pail stinger back, as long as you put the anti-kink device on it. And you have completely repaired that pail stinger. Very simple to do, very simple device, but it's very important. It's a big part of what happens. This foot valve is so important of keeping your dilutions good and solid at your mix tanks. So that's that. Let's move on to, we talked a little bit about HydroFlex injectors, and we talked a little bit about the tips that go with those. Again, if you're going to be in raw chemical, wear your gloves, wear your safety goggles, be smart. So I have an injector here that's just easy to handle. So again, that small tip, this dilution device has different tips. The ones we talked about with hydrominders are push-in tips. These are screw-in tips, and there's two different packs of them. There's a standard pack, which has all of these colors in it, and then there is a second pack, which is the ultra lean pack, and that's the top 4 colors that's on the chart. So it's lime, it's pumpkin, it's burgundy, and it's copper. These are very common to use with blendco products, the ultra leans are, because our products are so concentrated that we almost always end up in these ultra leans when we're setting up product. Not always. Maybe for the alkaline side of a dual injector, we need a bigger one to get enough alkalinity to do the job. So we have both kits available for you, and if you need them, Blendco has them, obviously. But they actually, rather than pushing in like the hydrominder tips, these just screw in the end of the barb that's on the injector. So one of the things to periodically check when you're working with an injector like this is that tip seated properly against that barb? If it comes unscrewed and it's loose, it can suck product around that and through the threads, and you'll use more product than you should. So you'll actually increase your cost over a period of time. So there's 2 things you can do. And for me, it's every once in a while in the morning when I'm walking through, I'll pull the hose off and I'll have a towel with me, and I just give that a twist and make sure it's tight, put the hose back on, move to the next one, pull off the hose, check it, put the hose back on, move to the next one. It's important for usage that you keep those tight. We also have available, if you want to go that far, is to put a small O-ring on this tip. And you can put that O-ring in and snug it down, and it helps hold it longer. I don't use a lot of them just because they're really hard to handle. So I like just to check them once in a while. But there you go. So another way, let's say that you don't have any of these screw-in tips, but you have a bunch of these push-in tips. So what we do is we'll add a piece of hose, small piece of hose with a connector, 1/4-inch connector, and we can push our tip right in the end of that, and now put it on the injector, and we can use the push-in tips with that type of injector as well. So there's lots of options. None of them are right. None of them are wrong. Each has its benefits. Each has its downfall. So it's just how you choose to do it and how you choose to maintain it. So we've got that as well. So probably the next thing that we need to discuss is, how do you know if your pre-soak is strong enough? And how do you know if your tire cleaner is strong enough? We talk about titration. And what titration is an actual measurement of the total alkalinity of a ready-to-use product. So let's say at a tunnel wash, you want your pre-soak to be, around 8 drops maybe. Maybe that's our target, 8 drops. So we need to collect a sample of that pre-soak and test it. So we use this kit to do that. If it's we can test high pH with this, the alkalins, or we can test the low pH. We call them low pH or acids, but we don't like to use the word acid. So low pH and high pH or alkaline. So inside of this, there are several components that make up this kit. And I'm quickly going to go through them. First, we have our collection device. We've got a little handle that's just made out of hose, but it helps keep your fingers out of the solution that you're testing. However, if you're going to go out to the bay and collect a sample or out of a mix tank, you probably want to wear gloves because, again, you want to protect yourself from any harm that could happen while you're working at the car wash. So make sure you're safe and do that. So that's our collection device. Here's our titration bottle. And we have our bromophenol blue, which is an indicator. And this is really a cool thing. When you squeeze this into here, it changes color. And the color depends on the pH of that solution. So if it's an acid solution, it'll be yellow. If it's an alkaline solution, it'll be purple. So right off the bat, we know if we're dealing with a low pH or a high pH product. And then we're gonna actually drop in the opposite. If it's an alkaline, if it's purple, we're going to put in some acid to neutralize it. And when it comes down to neutral and starts to go acid, it'll turn yellow. So we know that's the end point, and we can count how many drops of this acid it took to neutralize that alkalinity. That's the important thing to remember. We need to neutralize this, so it'll be the opposite. If we're going to neutralize an alkaline, we need an acid to do that. If it's an acid product we're testing, and we need to neutralize that and measure it, then we are going to use an alkali reagent, and that will neutralize the acid, okay? And it will change to purple, and then we can read how much it took to make that change. So I'm actually going to do that for you. It's pretty simple. You see that there's 4 bottles, and I only talked about 2 of them, right? I only talked about the acid and the alkali. Well, there's a 10 times of each, 10 times strength. So 10 times acid, this is just 10 times stronger than that one. So if you're testing a supersat tank, rather than count 700 drops of this one, you can do it with this one and count 70 drops. So it becomes very simple and a lot faster. But that's the 10 times. You won't use those too much, and then we have a 10 times acid as well. If you're getting into very strong acids, then you'd use the 10 times alkali for that. I'm going to put those in a bucket because we're probably not going to need them. If you ever get confused on how this works, how it's done, it's easy to do in a classroom or in a training session, but as soon as you get in the field and somebody's watching over your shoulder, it's difficult sometimes to do because you freeze up or whatever. Always, always on the back of the bucket is the instructions. It's also in all of our manuals. It's online with us. Lots of guys can teach you how to do this. If you ever run into trouble, just go back to your instructions. Mounted right there on the back of the container. So I am going to run out to the bay real quick, and sometimes you'll use a different collection container. Maybe it's a cup, maybe it's some kind of beaker or whatever. But you collect it from the tunnel or from the bay, and you bring it in. Now we need to get some of that, and that's what this is. This represents what I caught out in the tunnel. So I need to put that into this vessel right here. So I'm going to pour some of it into it, and I would fill that all the way up normally. And now we don't know what this was used last on, so we don't know what was in there. Is there some residual? We don't know. What was used with this last time? We don't know if it was an acid, an alkaline, was it the supersat tank? We don't know. So you always take some of what you're testing, put it in, and put it in there, and swirl it lightly. That's pre-contaminating our 2 containers with the product that we're going to test. So effectively, we've rinsed these with what we're going to test with, so it becomes a much more accurate test. So I'm just going to dump that down the drain at the car wash, and there we go. So now I get another sample now that we've pre-contaminated. And you want to make sure that this gets all the way full. That's really important. And then this goes on it and turn it over. It's very simple. And now we have our solution from, let's say it's a pre-soak. Okay, so this is our pre-soak from the car wash. Set that aside. Now you'll notice that each one of these pipettes has a different color tape on it. We want to match that with what we're going to test with. Now we don't know if this is alkaline or acid yet, so we're going to take some of the bromophenol blue, and we are going to introduce 4 or 5 drops. There's 4 drops. We can see that it's turned slightly purple. If you're using something that has a very high dye load, like tire cleaner, something like that, you may need to use, instead of 4 or 5 drops, you might need 6 or 8 drops. It won't affect the test at all. It just makes it a little bit darker. So I can put a few more in there if I want to darken it up. But it's purple, which means we are an alkaline, which means we need an acid to neutralize it. So we're going to take the orange label. We're going to pick the pipette. Proper pipette is the orange one. Set the others aside. And we're going to squeeze in the solution, squeeze the bulb, and we're going to load the pipette with solution. If you're right-handed, I would suggest squeezing this bulb with your left, because most people can't swirl this with their left hand, because as you're introducing this solution, you have to swirl this. It's kind of like rubbing your head and your tummy at the same time. It doesn't work, because it just doesn't work. So if you're right-handed, I would suggest that you do it backwards from what you would think, because you need to be able to swirl this. So with your left hand, you squeeze out the solution by pinching the bulb until the level in the pipette reaches the first line. You've got to hold it there. If you let go of it, you get an air bubble in there. And now you got to start over. So you want to squeeze it until you get to that line, and you got to hold it. Now, if you drink a lot of coffee, you want to either wait till the coffee's gone, or you want to do it before you drink a lot of coffee, okay? Just saying. So I'm holding that there, my solution in that hand. I just put that in the top of the bottle. And you can kind of hold it against the edge of it so that it's not so shaky. And then you start to swirl. And as you swirl, you gently squeeze the bulb, letting 1 drop at a time go into that solution. Now you don't have to count the drops, because each one of those lines on that pipette is 10 drops. So you just slowly drop them in, and I can see that it's getting fair. Oh, there we changed color, didn't we? So that is not all the way to the first line. So that's about 9, 8, maybe 9 drops. So I'm going to do one more drop just to make sure that it doesn't change anymore. So there's one drop. It's really about the same. And that's called the end point. It won't change anymore. You're at the end point. So you know that you've used 9 drops. Okay? So don't try to count the drops, because I can squeeze a very small drop when I'm wiggling it, and when I'm swirling this, I can squeeze a very small drop. So you don't want to count the drops. You want to measure the drops with the lines on here. So from there to there's 40 drops. Or if you're using the 10 times solution, that would be 400 drops. Okay, very simple. So that's our alkaline. So we're 9 drops, and we were targeting what, 8? So I might take my tip on my alkaline and go one size smaller. Then I would retitrate it and see if I've brought it down to 8. Maybe that drops me more than I want. Maybe it takes me to 7. So I'd rather run it at 8 than I would at 6, because I want clean cars. So, or if you're, maybe you're pinching pennies, and maybe 6 makes sense. So anyway, you do whatever you have to do to have it make sense at your wash. But that's how titration is done. So very quickly, without all of the detailed explanation, I'm going to do a low pH so that you can see the yellow turning to purple. So I have gone out to the bay, and I have gotten, and maybe it's a low pH wheel cleaner, okay, something like that. So again, I'm going to take this. We have to pre-contaminate it because we don't necessarily know what we've used this for before, but we know it was an alkaline, so we want to, surely we want to pre-contaminate with this low pH. So that's now clean. And that's now clean. So now I'm going to get my all the way full again is important, and put it in. I'm going to move that out of the way. Okay, so now we're going to put the bromophenol blue in again, same indicator, and we're going to put the 4 or 5 drops. So you can see already that it is yellow. So now we have to take it from yellow to purple. So that's a little different, right? To neutralize an acid, you have to use the alkali. So we're going to use the 1-time strength alkali reagent. Again, match the color. You get, squeeze the bulb, get it up to the top line. Hold it and introduce it and start your swirling 1 drop at a time. Now this is a tire cleaner, so I'm assuming it's fairly strong. So I'm going to squeeze a little bit faster. There it is right there. Starting to get a change at 10, 20, about 28 drops. So I still see a little bit of purple. I'm going to go 1 more drop. Got to find the end point. Another one, another one. Okay, it's not as close as I thought it was, because we're not at our end point. Oh wait, I am. We were purple at, was it 39? Yeah, 39. So, way to go, Carrie. Too far. We did get to our end point. Anyway, yellow to purple. Alrighty then. So that's titration. We're basically measuring how much it takes to neutralize our sample. So if it's alkaline, it can be purple, go to yellow. If it's an acid or low pH, you're going to go from yellow up to purple. Very simple, but we use titration a lot. If you call, perhaps if you're a customer of mine, you call me and say, what's my pre-soak supposed to be? I'm going to say you want to be about 8 drops, 8 or 9 drops. So you can actually use this to test how strong alkalins and acids are in your tunnel. You can also use it to test the supersat tank, to make sure that, you know, periodically, maybe it's at one of your quarterly things that you do at your car wash, is to check the titration of the tank. I don't worry too much about it on a daily basis, as long as I'm testing my solution that's going on the car, because that's what matters. If I maintain 8 pre-soak, and that's our target, then why test the tank? The tank's fine. Now, if this was to drop to 4 drops or to 3 drops, then I might want to check the tank and see if that's what the problem is. So it becomes a tool to make sure that you're using the proper chemistry at your car wash.
Hold on. Oops, I got my finger in there. I don't want to get the finger in there. That's not good. And that's good. So we're rolling.
Okay, so we're here to talk about blendco's new Super Smart system, a remote monitoring system that looks at your wash and gives you all kinds of useful information. Gives you levels of chemicals, gives you cost, gives you use of the chemicals, and even has an inventory module that we'll talk about. For starters, we'll describe the unit itself. Here we have a unit. If I turn it a little bit to the side here, you'll see that there's inputs for different chemicals. So we can take up to 18 different inputs. Oops. Okay, let's shoot that again. It takes 20. And the way I moved it wasn't so great. How,
All right, so you can just start from, like, let's take a look at this.
you don't want me to just start at the beginning?
No, we can jump in.
All right. So let's take a look at this system, and I'll describe a bit about it. So the first thing is you've got up to 18 different chemicals that you can add to it. 18 different inputs, 18 different products you could be looking at. If we take a glance inside, you'll see inside we have a bunch of electronic components that are basically taking data from the wash, data from the level containers, and assimilating that information into useful data for your wash. I'll shut this again. So in simple terms, how does this work? We use an ultrasonic sensor that bounces a signal down on the level of the product and can detect the level back up to itself. Now this sensor is designed to go on top of a special Super Smart container that we use for blendco products. This special container is a 6-gallon container. In the back of it we have a redesigned pail stinger that you're used to having, but designed for a 6-gallon container. So the product comes up through a small foot valve, goes out here through the hose to the point of application. By putting this in what is normally the relief valve on the container, we allow ourselves this opening to determine the level of the product. Now this device here can go on this 6-gallon container. It can go on an open head 5-gallon container. It can also go on a 30-gallon, a 55-gallon, a tote, or even a unique tank that you might have at your wash. So it's capable of measuring the level of chemical at almost any wash situation. The next part of Super Smart is after we have the chemical levels, we actually want to get a signal from the wash for each of the types of wash packages that you might have. So one of these wires will be hooked up to an input that says I just had a basic wash purchase. Another might be the plus wash, a third the premium, and a fourth the ultimate. The system, the Super Smart system, is capable of taking up to 6 inputs. So you could have 4 wash packages and 2 buy-up packages, or you could have 3 wash packages and 3 buy-up programs. So we can basically monitor up to 6 different individual inputs. All of the chemical connections are made easy with pre-wired, easy to apply attachments. Let me just say that again. Each of the products is connected to the SuperSmart system through a very easy to use connector. You simply place this into the unit, attach this, screw the wire connector on, and your product is attached. Do that again.
You hit the mic, so there was a big,
Oh, thank you.
a big
Okay.
thing, so let's try
Thank
to
you,
do
Neil.
that.
Okay. Let's see, what do we call that? The ultrasonic sensor is tied into the unit with an easy to apply connector. You simply connect it to the product that's being used, level 1, level 2, level 3. You plug this in, turn this screw, and the product is connected. Make sure that this is all the way tightened for the best signal result. Let me just think for a second. Another connection for SuperSmart, which is necessary for the unit to operate, is to use a Cat5 connection to an internet source. So coming out of the unit, you'll have this Cat5 cable. You'll plug it into an internet source. That'll take the data both from the level control and from the wash input and from the SuperSmart, take it to our website where you access SuperSmart information at supersmartinfo.com. The last obvious connection is just to give the unit power, so this would simply plug into a 110 volt outlet. So if you're setting up your wash, you can imagine now that I've described that you're going to go to each of your product containers and place an ultrasonic sensor. You're going to take each of your wash inputs and wire it into the bottom of the unit. You're going to plug it in and give it internet feed. That's about all you need to do to start your SuperSmart unit. Of course, there's instructions and help available at blendco to assist you. So refer to your SuperSmart manual and certainly call blendco for advice on hooking up SuperSmart. Maybe we don't even want to say that part here because that's more of a technical piece, right? Okay, so the next part would be to go over you have the presentation part. Is that enough takes for that? Would you want to do?
It's up to you. If you're comfortable with it, it's fine with me.
Well, I mean, you're kind of an expert.
Could
I
you do it
don't
again?
do it. Sure.
I'll do it one more
You're a
time.
little
Yeah.
stiff. You don't normally like that. I don't know why. Listen up.
A little
Do you want me
stiff.
to take my shirt off or something? Or-
Wow, okay. All right.
No, I'm just saying.
Well, it's
not
my
like
first
you.
run through it.
Exactly.
So
It's not
let's
like
do it
you.
again.
So
Okay.
I know him. He could do it better.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so, well, I'm definitely distracted by the background noise, but I won't be.
So now they're open.
Okay, I'll give you, I got a sexier beginning. Okay, ready? I'm going to take my shirt off. Hi, we're here to talk about SuperSmart. This is blendco's new revolutionary remote monitoring device for car wash chemicals. It's pretty exciting. We're entering a new era of where we're not just providers of chemical as your chemical manufacturers, we're also helping you monitor, use the product wisely, realize the best costs. In a way, SuperSmart is like having an on-site attendant at your wash 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Imagine in the best case situation, blendco sends a rep in. He comes in, what, maybe once a week, maybe twice a month. We have distributors out there who are trying to maintain a bunch of car washes, and they come in and they do things like flow testing and cost calculation. But realistically, with say 18 or 20 chemicals on there, how often can they look at the wash quality, to look at usage, to look at costs? If they're lucky, they might get that information once a month. You might notice a change in your usage or costs every other month. SuperSmart's going to identify that real time. At the end of a day, you're going to find a problem that you might have had. Halfway through the day, you're going to find a problem that you might have that's reducing customer satisfaction. SuperSmart's looking at your usage, your costs, every minute, every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So let's talk about how SuperSmart works. Okay? It's really pretty simple. We have a couple of inputs. We have an ultrasonic sensor that is bouncing a beam onto the solution, taking that answer back and determining the level of usage. As you wash cars, hour by hour, you're going to see the level slowly reduce. SuperSmart's going to see that level reduction, translating it into a certain number of gallons, and divide it by the number of washes that were used, in this case with molten bath product. We're going to tell you what your cost is. We're going to tell you what your use per car is. A lot of useful information. This ultrasonic sensor can go on this 6-gallon unit that's displayed here, the 6-gallon container, or it can go on to a 15-gallon, a 30-gallon, a 55-gallon, even a tote, or even a unique container that might be at your wash. We just need to get certain information about that container, and SuperSmart will diagnose that into a level reading. In this case, this SuperSmart container, the 6-gallon, also has a unique pail stinger that mimics the pail stinger approach that you're used to having with blendco, only we've miniaturized it. You've got the same little cap to squeegee off any leftover chemical. You've got the same 1/4-inch tube exit. You have a tiny little foot valve on the end. So that's unique to this 6-gallon container that's made for SuperSmart. Makes it easy to keep in those size containers, which a lot of our customers find as convenient and useful. Let's talk a little bit about the unit itself. If we look inside the unit, if we look inside the cabinet, you'll see there's basically a miniature computer inside. Yes, you have relays. And what does all that mean for you? You don't really need to spend any time inside the cabinet. The time that you need to spend is not inside the cabinet, but outside the cabinet, and even that's quite simple. Simple enough to plug into a 110-volt cord, simple enough to plug into a Cat5 internet connection. And the last piece is we want to take a signal from the wash. We can take up to 6 signals. So we're going to take something that represents the basic wash. Another signal will represent the plus wash. A third would be the premium, and lastly, something like your ultimate wash. We have 2 more wash inputs that we can take, typically used for things like buy-ups, hot wax, tire shine, those types of products. But you can mix and match. If you only have 3 wash packages, you can take up to 3 buy-ups. If you have 4, you can only take 2. So we're going to take an input from your wash that signals that, and the rest is going to happen on the programming you do online, setting up wash packages, and blendco's here to assist you with that information. So I didn't talk about the connectors at the side. Let me do that. Oops. I just want to give you a side view of where the ultrasonic sensor connects to the unit. You can see that we have a plate here labeled on this side from 1 to 10, on the other side from 11 to 20. And making the connections is simple. You don't need to be an electrician. You don't need to get out a screwdriver. You simply plug this in and then tighten the fitting around it, make it nice and tight.
Okay, we're getting a lot of mic. Hitting mic
Okay.
a couple times, so.
Yep, I forget about the mic. Okay.
Just
So let me do it again.
Move the mic up your jacket a little bit. That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
That'll help. Okay, and go ahead.
So let's take a look at where the ultrasonic connection attaches to the unit. You'll see that we have level 1 through level 10 labeled on this side, on the other side 11 through 20. It's actually quite simple. You just basically have a connector from the ultrasonic sensor that comes up, easy to attach, screw it on, and then do that for each chemical that's going to be monitored as part of the SuperSmart program at your wash. I think that's everything. So now you have the, did that have a little more life to it?
Yeah.
It's supposed to slide. Yeah, oh yeah, much better. Oh,
Okay.
good, very good, very good.
Okay. So now, so I was thinking with this, could we do it like this?
You can certainly do it like that.
Would it make sense to get closer to have that in the background or pull any of that material up front so that they know they're looking with that in the background, you know what I'm saying? Like what if I brought this whole thing up?
Why don't you, yeah, so we can see the.
Yeah,
sign
you know what I'm saying? Like it's a little bit like keeping,
Yeah,
Like
it's like a
right there.
photograph.
Yeah, right there.
okay.
Yeah, let me just get,
Hey, Bryce, remember at the end, maybe you could remember RMS put an end to guesstimation.
Oh, yeah.
Guesstimation in there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, hold on one second. So just
Let me just
kinda-
take a
you're gonna
drink.
have
Oh, I
to
don't
hold
have
it
to.
real still for me though, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to go in and out of focus very quickly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Would it help if we put it up on top of this?
You could do well if you do that. Then you're going to lose. No.
Then I can hold.
I'm just trying. It depends upon.
Do you
how
not have
close
the backing for this?
I purposely had it taken off because we weren't gonna use it, you were gonna sit down. So I have to find it again. I had Mike take it
Well,
off.
okay, so maybe we should go to my office then, because I don't know that I can hold it still enough.
Remember we originally said we had the chair set up in his office?
I mean, you tell me. Does
I'm fine as long as
Okay.
you don't move around too much. And I can get that sign in the background. I mean, right there is perfect.
Okay.
All right. So if you want to go ahead and just go ahead. Oh, you know what? Before you do that, I think. Okay. Can I just swing that around? I want to see if that light is the one that's causing the problem. I'm getting reflection glare, but it might be. You know what? It's that light.
Overhead?
I can hold it at a different angle?
Right there is good. Right there is good. Can you keep it there?
I'll try.
All right. Let me just bring.
We'll do take one
How
and.
about this light? Want me to turn this one
No,
around?
that's good. You can leave it. We're good. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to do my best. Okay, and you tell me how it works.
Okay.
All right, so we've talked about the setup, but now where's the data accessible? If you go to supersmartinfo.com, actually, I don't even know if that's the website. What's it called? Let me just look at my phone. Imagine if I give,
Just to know. I don't even know anymore.
imagine if I gave the wrong.
Yeah, I don't, well, we can dub it in.
Just go to
Mike here, that's
Amazon.com.
Mike?
What's that?
You want me that's Mike?
No, I have it right here.
Okay. What is it, .net?
It's at info. Yeah, supersmart.info. Get my angle back here.
Let's just see. Yeah, that's good. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've talked about the unit itself and how it functions, but let's look at where the information really hits the So we've talked about how the unit works, but let's talk about where the information is. We've talked about how the unit works. Now let's talk about where the information is gathered and used at your wash to make better decisions. First of all, you would log on to supersmart.info. Your wash would come up with a map that shows all the locations within your network. So in this case, this wash would have 3 locations in their network. The first level of information would show, the home page would basically show a lot of information. It would show the revenue at all the sites. It would show the number of cars washed. It would show the cost per car. I can't even read this, honestly, because I'm holding it at an angle for you.
So what?
I can't read it.
So the other way to do this would be for you to sit in the chair and hold it in your lap. I'll go over your shoulder.
Yeah, I think
Why
something
don't
like
we
that.
do Just give him the chair.
I just am spending, like, with it at this angle,
Yeah, no,
I
no,
can't
no,
read
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So turn it so your back is to me.
He's gonna get it.
Okay, I understand.
Okay. There we go. And just let me just get a good angle for me. Is that better for you?
Yeah, it's way
This
better.
is actually what happened now. Oh, you lost the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Just tilt it a little bit toward the right end up towards you. Yeah, right there. It's good. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yep, you're good to go. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've talked about the super smart machine itself. Now let's talk about where the information is gathered on our website and turns into useful and powerful decision-making information. First, you would log on to your own website area at supersmart.info. You'd put in your username and password, and up would come a screen like this, a home screen, that would show you a picture of your washes and the number of locations with a teardrop. In this case, this car wash owner would have 3 different locations. For every day, week, month, or year, they could select and see the revenue, the cars washed, the chemical costs, and the cost per car. Very useful information. They can also see the revenue as proportioned to the chemical costs. So this would be your first home screen. Imagine you own a set of chain. You'd know right away how much dollars you did today so far. You can then dial down and see each location. So let's say I dialed down to Red Rhino Car Wash, or in this case, Valley Car Wash. Let me do that one again. I didn't know it went to Valley. Okay. So from this home screen, let's say you wanted to dial down and see the next wash. You would push Valley Car Wash in this case, and up would come. This is not the right order. Okay, this is not the way this.
That's the way.
This is not the way.
This is our trade show.
This is not.
You know, this is.
This is not. I do the trade show. That's in the wrong order. This is what's. The next slide is supposed to be this slide right here. You've got it in the wrong order.
I didn't put it there. This is from
I'm just saying,
I know,
it's not. I present this at the trade shows.
How could it not be? This came from a trade show.
You must have got it mixed up somehow on the PDFs.
No, I didn't even know how to download it.
These sheets, these first three things are the last ones.
Brad, I haven't
I'm just
touched
telling
it.
you. I go to the trade shows and talk about it.
Whatever.
I mean, I can get my computer.
But I don't know how. Because I don't even know how to download them all.
Yeah, this isn't in the right order. So it makes it very difficult to talk about. I know what we could do. We could cut it each one, right? Okay.
Just say on this page,
Yeah, right.
you know, and then you just go to another page and say on this page.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can just
Ready?
do it that way. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, this isn't even the right one. This is the right one. No, it's not. Okay. Ready? I'm just going to start again.
Okay.
So we've talked about the machine itself, SuperSmart, and how you hook it up and how it functions. But where the rubber really meets the road is where all that data comes to our website at supersmart.info.
Okay. Hold it down just a tiny bit. Let me see, because we've got a little bit of glare now.
Okay.
Hold it that.
Like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So start over.
Can I just interject one thing? Maybe you should say that you can access this on all your devices.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
good
Like,
point.
It's not clear to me.
Yeah, good point. Okay.
iPad, phone,
Great, I'll do that.
Okay, you're good.
Okay, so we know how SuperSmart works now using ultrasonics and our SuperSmart system. But where you really get the value of this tool is when you look at it on, say, a smart device like this, or your phone, or your computer. You would log in to a unique customer website using a username and password at supersmart.info. When you'd log in, you'd see a picture for that day of each of your washes, totaling up the total of your network in terms of revenue, number of cars washed, chemical costs, and the average chemical cost per car. So you're basically looking down on all your washes and getting information about what kind of day you had. As you dial on a specific wash, now we're looking at a specific wash, in this case Valley Car Wash, for the day. You can change, mind you, on any of these screens, a week look, a month look, or a year look. For this day, you'll see a bunch of useful information. You can see early in the day there was actually precipitation denoted by that little gray graph. Each of the bar lines represents the amount of revenue received during an hour of operation of the business. You can see all your chemical levels and how full the containers are. So you can see that the midder lube is very full, whereas on this liquid alkaline, we're getting quite low. You can also see for that location, for that period of time, how many cars you washed, what your revenue is, what the average ticket price was, what your chemical costs are, what your average cost per car is, and what the weather was like. If I push on the next level for that same location and push on sales, I'll see the sales by package. So you can see the basic sales, the full service, deluxe, and the works wash, plus buy-ons, in this case, hot wax and tire shine. If I click on the chemical screen, I'll actually see my chemical levels. I'll see how many cars I could wash with the chemical level I have left, make a decision about whether I should change the pail or not. I'll see my usage in total gallons for that period of time, and I'll see my use per car in mils. This is important information. This is what tells us whether we're using the amount that we want to per car. And then, of course, the resulting cost from that use per mil. This is the chemical alerts page. When you log in, you'll see, if you see any numbers here, that's the number of alerts you'll have. And you can look and see what the alerts say. In this case, Valley Car Wash has yellow color code at 9.3 mils, which is 38% lower than expected. You can basically make a decision about that, click on the X and remove that chemical alert from the list. It'll store the chemical alerts until you're notified. These chemical alerts can also be sent to you via a text message or an email or both, and you can determine who should receive what level of alert. Once you click on the settings page, you'll go through different settings that will set up your wash. You can set up the location. We're supposed to do the location first. So this is so out of order. You see this mosquito flying around here? Did you see that?
I did not.
Yeah. So this is way out of order. Okay. You ready?
Just hold it down just a tiny bit.
Sure. Right there?
And over to your left just a tiny bit. Right there. That's basically where you are. Up
Okay.
there. Mhm.
If you click on the settings menu, you'll get numerous different areas for entry, including the location, the users, the packages, the products, and the chemicals. This is the location setting. This is the name of the wash and the address of the wash, which will place the teardrop for your location at the right place. Let's go to the users section. This is the users page. This is where you determine who in your company gets what information. You can put in their email address and you can determine whether they should receive access to sales data, chemical data, or settings. So you can provide them all or only one of the different levels of information. This is the package screen. The package screen sets up your washes. In this case, you can put any name in. This one says basic, but this is completely customizable. You can put in whatever price you want and determine whether this is a package, wash package, or an upsell by clicking on the box. You can see hot wax is clicked and the 4 packages are considered package products. Let me do that one again. By clicking on the packages menu, you'll get a listing of the different packages where you can customize the names of your wash packages and the names of any upsells. You also customize the value dollar-wise and determine whether those are upsell or packages simply by clicking on or off on the upsell. If you click on the products menu, you'll get the opportunity to put in the different products being used at your wash. I think the mosquito's on my cheek. Okay, so let me do that one again. Ready? Mm-hmm. If you click on the products menu, you'll get a listing of the products that you need to input for your wash. In this case, the first product was blue color coat. You determine the size of the package, the price that you want to use. You're also going to input the refill value. And you'll notice an inventory function here. It'll tell you how many gallons are in use and how many are in storage if you choose to use the inventory functions. So next one is chemicals. It's like a hunting match to find the chemicals one. The last, the last section on the settings page is the chemicals. This is where you take the product, and in this case, this allows for us to put in any usage of HPH or a powdered alkaline. You put in the expected usage. This is key. So in this case, Rhino Bright is expected to be used at 5 milliliters. You'll say whether Rhino Bright is used on which packages. This product happens to be used on all 4. And you give it a plus minus on when you want to be alerted. In this case, the plus minus is 1.5 milliliters, meaning that if we use 3.5 milliliters or less, an alert will go out, or if we use 6.5 milliliters or more, an alert will go out. The refill level is set at 2 gallons, which will send an alert out that says, I'm low on Rhino Bright below 2 gallons. You basically do this setup for every wash chemical in your process. Another feature is you can maintain and control your inventories, which helps with buying products. Oh, I think that mosquito bit my cheek. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. I have an itchy bump on my cheek now. The Super Smart RMS now has an inventory function also, which allows you to look at inventory at your various sites across the country and determine things like reorder time, reorder volumes. So this shows the quantity on hand and the quantity in inventory, and you can basically update this information when you receive product in, and it will guide you towards buying smarter, especially when you own and manage multiple locations. Another feature to point out is that virtually any information on here can be exported. Another feature to note is the reports feature, which basically any information you're looking at here can be taken out in a report through an ASCII delimited file. Let me just do that again. If you click on the reports field, you can basically download any information look that you might want for your wash and bring it into an Excel format. You just click on reports, query the information you want to have, and download it into that spreadsheet. I think maybe just a wrap up then. I think that's everything. Let me just check the pages. Yes, 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 yes. Yep. Oh, here's the reports. Okay, that's all right. Okay. So, should I just do a little wrap up here that sort of ties it together?
Okay.
Let me take the chair away.
What was I going to do with the? You asked me.
Just so you remember saying, like, remember.
Oh, yeah.
Smart. Put the end to guesstimation.
Right. It sounds a little canned, but okay, I'll try not to make it
It's
canned.
our tagline.
Right.
Move this back so I don't hit the bathroom door. And go ahead.
Okay, so hopefully by now you're pretty excited about what Super Smart can do, and maybe you can see that this is the future for any real big successful operation in the car wash business. This really puts the end to guesstimation. Remember the days of marking drums with a marker at the end of each day to see usage gaps. That's pretty old-fashioned and pretty hard to do when you're managing more than one car wash. SuperSmart's looking at your car wash every 5 minutes, taking that information, providing you useful tools to make smarter decisions about your wash. And let's just remember that it's not all about saving chemical. It costs just as much to underuse chemical, send a customer away without clear coat protectant, without tri-foam, when you weren't aware that that was even going on. SuperSmart's looking at your wash for you. It's like having an attendant at your wash all the time. Thanks for listening to this piece on SuperSmart, and certainly find a blendco representative for more information about how you can use this valuable tool at your wash.
Have her reach out and start, or you can start it.
You want her to do it? You want to see her putting the money in?
Nah, it doesn't matter.
Huh?
It doesn't matter.
Tell me, yes or
Doesn't
no?
matter, no. All right. Just have her go when you're done. Tell me when you're ready. I'm ready. Okay, so I wanted to spend a few minutes here at the car wash, actually in the bay, and talking a little bit about the kinds of things that we're looking for when you go to a site and you're taking care of a customer, or if you own the site or work at the site, the kind of stuff that you want to be looking for and looking at when you get here. So one of the things that I do is I use my ears, not only my eyes, but my ears. And I want to hear what's going on, because I can tell how well things foam. I can hear different, like there, I hear the high pressure pump come on, so I know the undercarriage is working as she's pulling in. So I can verify that these things are all working as that's done. So, and then I can listen also for the horn when they get on the stop plate. There we have that, so we know that's working. We're looking and we're listening, trying to get things to work. So then I'm going to look for coverage of product, of my pre-soaked soaps, stuff like that. You've got to get good coverage for these things to work. So right now we're squirting on our tire cleaner and doing a quick high pressure blast on the rocker panels. So you want to look at the nozzles. Are the nozzles plugged? Are they free flowing? Is everything operating the way that it's supposed to be? So you can see that, and you can sometimes even hear some of that. So now we're going to look at our coverage of soap. And so I can see it going on the car. It's nice. It's painting on. I'm not missing any spots. And that's what I'm looking for. Are any of my nozzles plugged? Is everything functioning the way it's supposed to? And I can hear, and the more you're around a site, you can actually hear what that pre-soak's supposed to sound like. And now we get our friction coming on. We've got good coverage, so we're going to have really nice lubricity for our friction. So as it goes through its washes, I'm just listening and hearing. Here I heard the side blasters come back on, so I know that that's right. And so we're getting our wheel cleaning done right now with the spinners. So you can look at those, make sure that the nozzles are not plugged on that. In this particular wash, we're also looking at the top brush. Is the top brush coming down and contacting the vehicle the way it's supposed to? You see the way it's about 3 or 4 inches of pressure into the vehicle surface, so we know we're going to get it clean, but not too tight. We can watch it as the top brush goes down in the rear of the car. That's functioning properly as well. Then it'll come in and it'll back up again onto the car and get the rear panels, the back side of the car. Make sure that it's not pushing too hard against the vehicle. Then we get our jog. Is the jog working? That kind of stuff. Basically just watching the entire process and making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Every machine's a little bit different, and every application's a little bit different. So you have to know what's going on at your particular site. making also sure that, you know, we're getting some water on that top brush as it comes back, and that's all working fine. Also putting a little bit of soap out to keep things lubricated as it moves forward. Then again, one of the things that you want to consider is, how is this looking for the customer? So if I was inside the car, what would I be seeing right now? I'd see a bunch of soap on my windshield, then I'd see a cool light coming on, along with water, and in this case, I think a little bit of a product that sets the car up for drying and for retaining the clear coat. Now here comes our hot wax. That looks nice. It's a nice blanket of foam, and the coverage is going to be great. And again, how does it look for the customer? Are they seeing just crazy foam, crazy beautiful lights, and picking up the fragrances also? So you're also smelling, so when you're checking this stuff. Now here comes a rinse. So again, we're making sure that all of our nozzles are free of obstruction, so they're flowing. Going to check both sides, passenger and driver sides. Nozzles are clear on the lower rocker panel. So that's all working very well. You can also start to see with that pass of the protectant that the water starts to bead up on the car. And it might be difficult to see, but I can actually see the water is broken on the car. It's not a flat, you know, blanket of water. It's broken up into large beads that will come off the car when it goes through the blowers. And then we get our final pass of rinse, which is our RO water, or spot free, which gives us our final rinse. You're also looking for areas like in this tray around the windshield. Are we collecting too much foam there that might come out in the blowers? Making sure we get a good rinse for the vehicle. Then it's going to come out and go through the blowers. Okay, this is the equipment room section. So when you get to the wash, we've been out, we've watched the car. The equipment was working the way it was supposed to work. It was applying our product right. We had good coverage. Coverage is everything. We had our fragrance, we had our show. The performance was there. The water was beating up on the car. Every step of the process we looked at, evaluated, and noted that it was doing either well or not well. So obviously that's the best place to start, because you can find issues before you ever get in the back room. So everything was pretty good out there, so there's really nothing to hunt for. Now we're just going to look around and see if there's anything obviously going on that we need to attend to. So we're going to check our tank. We're going to make sure that the level's where it should be, looking back at the floats that we talked about earlier, looking for that slightly cloudy solution that's in there. You know, you can notice the light. You can see our powder level. We've got plenty of powder in there. So, you know, the tank's got power to it. That's all good. A quick look at that. You move on down the line, and you're going to basically look at each product. So this product is pulling out of the pail, coming up our pickup tube. Again, the hydrominder's down inside this tank. It's pulled up all the way to the hydrominder. Everything looks good. The mixed tank's got product in it. You can pull the chain down if you want to on the hydrominder just to check it, make sure there's no air leaks in the hose. It all looks good. This this particular wash has the flow jet inside this tank. So another thing that you'd check why the wash is running on another customer, you'd come in here and listen for that air pump. Your ears are a huge tool in the back room. So eyes, ears, and nose, all your senses have to be working to find issues and find problems. And the more you're around your site and different car washes, you start to pick up the sounds that are right and sounds that are wrong. Is the air pump running sporadically? Can you hear a valve come on at the wrong time? Things like that you pick up. So don't be afraid to listen and pay attention to what's going on around you. So you just basically walk through this equipment room and take a look at all of your products. And this one has 2 lines going into it. So that's a dual hydrominder. And everything looks good. So pretty basic. If there would have been a problem out there, then we know we could have come in here and probably found the issue while we're in the back room. So that's a great place to start out there. Finish up in here. Take note of how much product is in your pails. You want to make sure that you have enough product online for a busy day. If you come in the morning and you have just an inch in that pail, you're going to be in trouble. So you want to keep an eye on your inventory as well. You want to take a look at it, and over a period of time, you're going to know about how much gets used every day out of these pails, because you're looking at it all the time. And you can say, okay, it's going to be a weekend, the weather's going to be good, maybe I better change that pail to make sure I have enough. So those are things that you want to look at, and so we'll move on from here, but that's really great.
Okay.